All right, welcome everyone. We are called to order at 5:30 on the dot. I understand we have Commissioner Smith on the telephone. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, Ms. Bentley, do you need to go over any questions with Commissioner Smith?
Not tonight because it's legislative, not quasi-judicial.
Perfect. And I notice on the agenda it indicates that speakers shall have 5 minutes for quasi-judicial proceedings. With respect to this, are all of the items on tonight's meeting agenda considered quasi-judicial?
No, they're legislative, and you have 3 minutes for legislative.
3 minutes apiece? Okay, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with respect to that. Okay, perfect. We'll go ahead and skip B unless someone would like us to do a moment of silence. Commissioner Tawadia, would you like to lead us with the pledge? Thank you, sir. Okay, we're going to move right on into public hearings. We're going to start with D as in Delta 1. Jill?
Chair and Board of County Commissioners, D1 allows for the reading of the tentative aggregate operating millage rate to fund the portion of the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget that is supported by property taxes. At this time, I would ask the Budget Office read into the record the tentative aggregate millage rate for fiscal year 2020-2021.
Chair and Board of County Commissioners, the aggregate tentative millage rate for fiscal year 2020-2021 budget is 5.6404. The tentative aggregate millage rate represents a 1.35% decrease when compared to the aggregate rollback rate of 5.7176. The tentative aggregate millage rate represents a 3.5% reduction when compared to the aggregate current fiscal year 2019-2020 millage rate of 5.8447.
The Chair and Board of County Commissioners, D2 allows for the public to comment on the revised tentative county budget for fiscal year 2020-2021. Before we begin public comment, I would ask that the Budget Office read into the record the revised tentative budget information.
Please.
The fiscal year 2020-2021 tentative budget is $1,485,676,587. The budget represents a decrease of $84,720,385 or 5.39% less than the fiscal year 2019-2020 current budget of $1,570,396,972.
Chair, we are now ready to accept public comments on the revised tentative budget for fiscal year 2020-2021.
All right, we've got at this point 4 separate public comment cards. I'll just read out the names so that folks can get ready when they deem it appropriate. First up, we'll have Charles Tovey from Melbourne. Then we'll have Jacob Gelman from Melbourne, Krishna Tawadia from Merritt Island, and Richard, and I mispronounced your last name, sir, the last time. Help me out with it again. Heffelfinger from Cocoa. Thank you. And we'll start up with Mr. Tovey. Welcome, sir. Good to see you.
Thank you. Charles Tovey, 2555 Melbourne. Surprised at this meeting. I thought it'd be a regular one, and I do have some things that I would like to address immediately and not on the budget. And first, I do not endorse or condone any harm or physical aggression towards anybody, and I think we should not only protect the children, but the elderly and the handicapped as well. And if you're going to legalize the sign, maybe you could have it in different levels depending on severity, a yellow, a orange, and then a red with skull and crossbones. And if it's legal, I don't have any problem with it other than it being an additional sentence. And enough for that. Going with the dune line erosion, and that's what I wanted to speak on the last time I was here. And when you go to the beach, you can see the sand, and this is partly to do with the budget because we spend money on, but half of it's washed away, and because of the storms, there's levels, and there's walls that the beachgoers have to climb over or climb down to get to the ocean. Most of this, half of the sand is washed away, but in turn, this is halfway through the turtle season, and the turtles migrate to this area to lay their eggs. And when they get to the dune line or the beach line, they're faced with these walls of sand, which they cannot get over and they cannot climb because they're steep pitched slants. So they lay their eggs on closer to the shore, and then the waves wash the eggs away. So that's part of the problem, as well as the beachgoers not being able to climb over. There's a 3-foot section, and then you go up 20 yards, there's another 5-foot section, and you have to climb over them, which I don't think the turtles would be able to. Last thing I want to say was on the lagoon. I'm almost finished, and what I have been doing for all these years seems to be the common problem throughout the lagoon. And once I address it, I'm hoping that you'll give it plenty of attention. And I don't mean any sarcastic remarks to the board or anybody in the county, and excuse me for being me. Ego, Amy, ego. I am that I am. Thank you for listening to me and putting up with public comment, and hope everybody's safe in the COVID virus and we work the budget out. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Tovey. All right, next up, we will have Jacob Gelman from Melbourne. Welcome, sir.
I could start off this speech with a metaphor, quote, phrase, or appeal to common values. Yet I feel doing this would allow you to drift from the seriousness of my words. So I will tell you from the beginning the veracity and anger from which I came to speak. The budget you consider today is a gross and undemocratic overreach of governmental authority that borders on tyranny. In a time when our county faces the impacts of a national recession, pandemic, and civil rights movement, the budget you decide on today is important now more than ever. Yet, the plan proposed today shows a gross negligence of county values that prioritizes the plea of a mismanaged and unaccountable sheriff over the will of the people. We are predicted to lose $40 million in tax revenue, and yet you vote to allocate additional money to the sheriff's office, including spending $750,000 on new doors at the jail, while at the same time cutting the Public Works Department budget by 27%, tourism development by 28%, and perhaps most disgustingly, cutting the budget for the supervisor of elections by 15%. The same year as a pandemic, when most poll workers are old and unlikely to volunteer, during one of the most divisive elections in American history, when more people will vote than ever before. So how can you prove to me this is worth maintaining the sheriff's budget? How can you prove to me the value of your decision when I don't even know what the sheriff's office spends their money on? When you have consistently taken away any oversight? When they receive the most money, yet the least amount of scrutiny? Our county is struggling. Teachers don't have enough resources to keep their students safe. Schools don't have enough resources to keep their students safe. People are struggling financially. They can't afford rent and are living paycheck to paycheck. There are those struggling with healthcare and housing security, those working to keep this country safe and to keep this county safe and watch do nothing for them. Yet to you, new cop cars, jail doors, and tasers are more important. Keeping fishing for fugitives is a better allocation of resources than keeping kids from becoming fugitives through quality education and resources. Indeed, it is possible that the sheriff's office needs this money, that in the end it is better than the protection of our democracy, clean drinking water, or public transportation. Perhaps voting is less important than new doors at the jail. Yet if this were true, the budget would be available, for we both know that those actions taken in the dark are rarely of a good nature. For you to vote for this budget without first requiring a line item budget from the sheriff's office is more than negligent, it is outright tyrannical. It is for you to lose any sense of values and steal any sense of democracy from the people, to give blind faith to a man as if he is your messiah. It is to be the pinnacle of a politician in America, lose any morals or values simply to do what is popular, simply for re-election. And for what? So you can continue selling out those who elected you, being a servant to a man who uses this commission year in and year out. I implore you to require a line item budget, to require transparency in governance, to allow the people to know the workings of their government. Anything less paints the sheriff as our tyrant and you as his puppet. Do better for the people and for yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we'll have Krishna Tawadia from Merritt Island. And while Krishna's coming up, I will just say very briefly, with respect to that our sheriff is up for election. There are two choices that are available, and if the electorate chooses one of those choices, I think the electorate will have spoken. So I plan on supporting whoever's in that office, but the public has a choice, and if the public chooses to continue with Sheriff Ivey, I'm going to continue to support him. All right, you've got the floor, sir.
All right, Krishna Tawadia from Merritt Island. All right, hello. I stand here today in firm affirmation with my friend Jacob. Right now, as a county and as a country, we stand here in damage control. Right now, the coronavirus pandemic, because of past mistakes, has already gone way out of hand, and therefore we must use our CARES Act funding the best possible way. Right now, the BCSO has been given $177,000 from the CARES Act, although it's already been proven that, first of all, it's impossible at this point for the BCSO to cause any real improvement towards the coronavirus pandemic. And at the same time, this means that this CARES Act funding, which is meant to help protect the people, has not been used for such purpose. Along with that, the supervisor of election has also seen a $942,000 decrease in their budget. Right now in a pandemic, right now when voting matters, if we're to really believe that the decision between Alton Edmond and Sheriff Wayne Ivey is to be legitimate, we need to make sure that things like the supervisor of election are kept legitimate institutions so that people will be able to vote. Right now, the people's choice is the most important choice, as you yourself, Commissioner Lober, have agreed to. Now, along with that, even if Alton Edmond or Sheriff Wayne Ivey, the current sheriff, were to be elected, it is still an issue of transparency and democracy. I still believe that a line item budget is necessary simply because accountability will lead to efficiency. Right now, we don't know how the sheriff, whether it be Alton Edmond in the future or Sheriff Wayne Ivey right now, how they're going to use their money and exactly how they're going to use it. Right now in a democracy, I feel that we as the people have the right to know how the money is being used, if we're going to spend our taxpayer dollars on it, if we're going to be given the right to vote. Because what purpose does our right to vote have if we don't know what we're voting on? Right now, as elected officials and as the sheriff's office is also an elected office, you guys are due some respect due to the voting process. However, that respect is derived from a source of legitimacy. If things like the supervisor of elections are not given legitimacy, if they're having money taken away from them, we can't necessarily prove or we can't necessarily believe as the people that they are important, that there are legitimate decisions being made. Right now, we have to ask ourselves what we as a country value and we as a county value. We have to show that the sheriff's office, we are not going to simply bend to their will, and instead we are going to value the elections. Wanting our rights should not be considered radical, and if one is to really like the sheriff, if one really believes in the sheriff, then why would they be afraid to see what the sheriff is doing or to have transparency? If anything, they would want to know what the sheriff is doing in order to better see and better trust the sheriff. So in summation, I believe that this county has a responsibility to allocate its money better, not towards the sheriff's office, but towards things such as the supervisor of elections in order to protect our rights and towards pragmatic values such as this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That was well timed. Jill, just a quick question for you.
Yes, sir.
For Jill. I haven't heard from the supervisor's office that they have any concerns over the proposed budget. Have you?
No, what they requested from the board, that is actually what's in the proposed and tentative budget. A lot of the costs associated with the election occur in the fiscal year prior to the general election. So they did receive a large bump in this fiscal year for the costs associated with ballots and poll workers, all those types of things.
So would there be any truth whatsoever, potential truth to an assertion that we've somehow taken money away from her office in order to support the sheriff?
The tentative budget is where the board will be voting on tonight is what they requested. That was their requested budget.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Just real quick, the constitutional offices, they turn their budget into us, and I don't remember one time up here, all we do is kind of approve it. If we weren't to approve it, they would send an appeal and get the budget anyways. We just have this mandate along with other things that we need to do. Again, you could say no to certain budgets, but then they would take it up higher, and there's probably like a 99.9% chance they'd end up with the budget. So,
Right.
Right.
Florida statutes do establish the guidelines for how the charter officers submit their budgets, and there is an appeal process.
we really don't have, if we had jurisdiction over them, but we really don't, because they're constitutional and they're elected officials, and like you said, Mr. Chair, that would be for the public to change what they're doing at election time with votes.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, last up, Mr. Heffelfinger. Did I get it? Yeah. All right, good job. Thank you. I was determined that time. Welcome, sir.
This is a lot easier than the previous speakers.
Yes, sir.
I have a written statement. I'm going to read it for inclusion in the public record.
Please.
Guess I can give that to the
Just when you're done, sir.
after I'm done. My name is Richard Heffelfinger. I reside at 2000 Juniper Drive, Cocoa, Florida. I'm a constituent of District 1. And then I'm going to be reading a public, whatever. Good evening, Brevard County Board of County Commissioners. I came before this board during the meeting on 9/3/2020, and at that time I asked for the opportunity to speak in more detail with the board concerning waste management issues that impact not only me, but all incorporated residents of Brevard. I believe I have some good ideas and would like the opportunity to be heard. I am before you again tonight to request that the Brevard convene another special meeting, the Brevard Board convene another special meeting on this topic. This meeting would act as an opportunity to follow up the discussions that occurred during the special meeting conducted on 7/30/2020 that addressed waste management collection. I sent an email to my commissioner, Rita Pritchett, today informing her that I would be asking the board tonight to hold another special meeting and that I would appreciate it if she would propose having another special meeting and asking for a vote from the board. Thank you, Richard Heffelfinger, blah, blah, blah. And that's all I had for today.
I appreciate it, sir.
I'll just give a copy to the clerk.
Please, if you would. Commissioner Pritchett, is that a new one or an old one?
Yeah, I was just going to mention, I followed up with an email with them, and I'd ask that maybe he get with us individually so we can hear what he has, then we can make a decision
Sure, and
on
I'll just
the advantage of that later.
I'll throw this out there as well, whether it's that issue or any other issue. I've never been opposed to having a meeting called, at least not that I can recall.
What?
So anyone that ever wants to call a meeting,
I think with us individually, then
Yeah.
that way we can see if we're ready for that step with recommendations. I get recommendations often, and I'd love to hear yours. So if you call my office and we'll sit down and I can hear what you have. Okay.
If there's a meaningful alternative, I haven't heard it yet. If there's one that you're aware of, I'd be happy to meet with you to discuss it. It's just got to be, something that involves the trash getting picked up at the end of the day. Whatever that is, if you have an alternative that would cause that to continue to be the case, that would save us some money, I'll be happy to meet with you. Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. All right, that's all we have as far as public comment cards, unless we've got anything more. Sally? Nothing more? All right, we're going to move through here on to D3. Mr. Bate?
The Chair and Board of County Commissioners, for item D3, it is recommended that the Board of County Commissioners discuss and tentatively adopt the fiscal year 2020-2021 millage rates. Any changes to the millage rates under this item will be recomputed and announced under item D4. And if there's no changes, we would need a vote of the board on that.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the tentative millages.
We have a motion from Commissioner Pritchett. I have a light from Commissioner Tawadia. Commissioner Tawadia? Hang on, you're off. You're on.
Okay. On July 7th, this board approved giving the firefighter union the equivalent of a 2.38% raise. It is clear this board has an unjustifiable affinity for liberal labor unions. Quite the opposite. I have a grounded appreciation for the county employees that decide to let their work ethic and dedication dictate their compensation, not a union card. I would like to initiate a Me Too clause where county employees will see the same salary benefits as the IAFF employees. This would mean two things. The 2% holdback to be put forth, as well as an additional 0.38%. Recall, this board just allocated $500,000 of general fund for employees that were not ours. This 0.38% represents a fraction of that amount, about $370,000, of which $78,000, or less than 20%, would come from general fund dollars. This would not trigger a tax increase or require us to bust the cap. Again, all I'm asking is that we treat people who work for us no better or no worse than the IAFF employees. So after discussion, I'd like to make a motion to direct staff to implement a COLA of 2.38 in the fiscal year 2021 budget.
Commissioner, a couple questions for you. I appreciate some of what you've just mentioned. I do have to differ with your conclusion or your interpretation that we're supporting liberal labor unions as opposed to simply prioritizing public safety, as many of us, I know certainly I mentioned I intended to do prior to having run an election. I would love to do more for all of our employees, but the question always comes down to where the money comes from. And you've mentioned that it's not going to result in us having to break the cap, but where is that going to come from?
Thank you. I'll assess the first one, the notion that they're not liberal,
Sure.
I guess. I'd go back to a couple tweets here from the President of the United States, who happens to be, as you know, a Republican. Quote, "I never give the support to crazy union leadership, those people who rip off members with their ridiculously high dues, medical and other expenses, and being paid a fortune." He goes on in another one, quote, "I've done more for firefighters than these dues-sucking unions will ever do, and I get paid zero." That's our standard bearer, Republican president, who pretty much outlines the issues there. These would come from various MSTUs in which there is a buffer, as well as about 78,000 that would come from general fund. And I don't mean to say this again, but it bears repeating. $500,000. I am asking for 20%, less than 20% of what we just took and handed another constitutional office, of which we had zero liability for. Yet all the people who you see out here who work extremely hard, I think deserve that compensation. Again, a total of 370, 78, which would come from general fund. So again, no cap busting, and no tax increase.
Here's my concern, and there are a few concerns I have with respect to that. I like the idea, at least in theory, but us giving $500,000 to the clerk's office, and incidentally, I'll just reiterate that I didn't vote on that item. We're not getting an apples-to-apples comparison of what those workers were making prior to that money being distributed to them or allocated to them, and now. You had folks, as I understand it, roughly half of the 500 that was distributed, as I understand it, was distributed for folks that were furloughed that were earning $0 per pay period. They were furloughed for a period of 6 weeks where they were making nothing. I don't think we have anyone under the county umbrella that's in anything remotely close to a comparable position. The other folks that were there, all of them, with no exceptions that I'm aware of, although I'll grant that there may be some, the remainder of them, I think, had a 20% minimum salary decrease for a period of at least 6 weeks. I don't know that we've done that to anyone in the county umbrella. I also don't know that the starting wages over at the clerk's office or the comptroller's office were equivalent to what we have. I don't know that they were paid more or less or the same. So to say that we've done something and that because we gave 500 to them, shouldn't we give 500 to ourselves? Maybe. It just depends on where they started and where our folks were starting and whether they're comparable or not.
And maybe those would have been good questions to ask prior to the allocation of said $500,000. Would there be an increase over the previous years? But again, I voted against it. I understand you did not vote for it. I voted against it because those were not our employees. The fact that that $500,000 came from the taxpayers and could be used for our employees, I think is short-sighted. And I believe, again, I'm asking for less than 20% of that money coming out of general fund.
I don't have any qualms with respect to the $78,000 coming from the general fund, to the extent that that makes some meaningful difference or any difference. If that's what you'd like, I'd certainly support that. But when you say various MSTUs, I'd be very curious as to which MSTUs and what the opportunity cost would be associated with each of those that has to be adjusted and the amount that each of those has to be adjusted by. I'm open to considering it. I mean, I'd rather focus on that than whether labor unions are liberal or somewhat liberal or totally liberal. I really, quite frankly, don't care whether there's a union or not. I'd rather just make sure that our employees are treated right, irrespective of whether they're unionized. But the big concern, again, is where the money's going to come from. So if you've got the figures, which MSTUs are we talking about, how much from each, and what do we have to otherwise defund in order to make this happen?
And I'm going to punt that one over to Ms. Hayes. I was more concerned with not having to raise the MSTU above the cap than I was exactly what that amount would be.
And so just a reminder, we did budget the 2% cost of living adjustment in the proposed and tentative budget, but the recommendation was to hold off on implementing that until more was known about the revenues and those losses. So when looking at an additional 0.38%, you mentioned the MSTUs, but it's also the enterprise funds such as solid waste and utility services. I don't have with me a breakout on the MSTUs. I have an estimate based on department, so I could answer questions about department-specific increases.
And Commissioner Tobias, since this is something you proposed, I'd have to lean on you to a degree to give us a little more info, because I'm still just not getting enough of a picture in terms of what kind of an impact this would have. It's interesting, but I don't have enough of an idea in terms of how this is actually going to affect things on the ground.
Yeah, I can address that. Commissioner, we would not be looking to change any of the millages or any of the level of services. As you know, throughout the organization, we average in the area of about 200 vacancies at any particular time with 2,300 employees. So if the board chose to do this, that funding, which is going to be distributed throughout the organization and all the various departments and all the various revenue streams that come in, would be made up without changing the millages or the revenue structure, the user fees, et cetera, that are out there. And we would do it through vacancies, or the departments would have to see what other. There may be a few instances, especially in smaller departments, where they don't have any vacancies, and that would be the areas where, on the general fund side, that $78,000, we would have to allocate it. If the board chose to do this, as we indicated to you, the good news is we have been doing somewhat better in our revenue collections for general sales tax, et cetera, which makes up the general fund revenues. And so we are okay, at least for the couple of months that we've been doing since the budget development in May, and what we were anticipating the revenue shortfalls to be, that we could cover it if the board so chose.
Last question before I turn it over to Commissioner Pritchett. Mr. Bate, I'm interested in doing this. I guess the big question that I'm still coming back to is what impact this would have on us. I just don't want to support something because it sounds great to find out, gee, now we have some unintended consequence that's going to put one or more departments or employees in a horrible position. Is there anything that you can think of that would be problematic in that?
Not other than what I've indicated to you in the smaller departments, where that would be the one area we would have to look at. And in those cases, those funds from the general fund side would be the ones where we would have to allocate them if we did any additional dollars, and that would be a portion of the $78,000, which I believe we will have available in the budget overall.
I appreciate it, sir. Commissioner Pritchett?
Mr. Abate, why did the IAAF get a 2.38%?
That is the equivalent of their step increase. So it's the annual increase that they receive, which they negotiate in the collective bargaining. What is not included and not part of that is the separate increase in this contract. As you recall, we had the Evergreen study. So come October, there's additional funding that was available last year that the firefighters did not receive because that money was part of the negotiation process, and the board recently approved the contract for October that included those dollars. As you remember, it came before the board, and so that's where we are. So that 2.38%, to answer your question, is the equivalent of the average increase that the firefighters received as part of the step increase and or longevity payments that they get under the collective bargaining agreement.
Okay, so you did that negotiations, because I remember when we started this, we wanted to make sure everything kind of stayed flat.
Right.
Till we got through this cycle to figure out where we ended with the budget. Commissioner Tawadia, if we could call, if you want to call a break so I can ask questions. I have no clue where this lands financially, so I can't support it unless I understand it. If we did something like that tonight, the final approval would be later, but right now I just can't do something I haven't had time to look at. I almost would rather to back off the other guy's increase right now, keep money in reserves and make this, I know, because negotiations, right? We're stuck. I know, I get it. But I don't know financially where this lands us, and I really do have a lot of concern about this year's coming up, trying to cover all the costs. So I can't do this tonight if I don't have time to look at it.
Commissioner Tawadia, and then I'm going to jump in again if I may.
Commissioner Pritchett,
Yes, sir.
it doesn't have any impact on any of the votes we are about to take. It's not going to change any
We're
of them.
giving an
It's not
increase
gonna-
to a small amount of people, and we're not giving it to everybody, so.
That is my,
I know.
you hit the
I
nail
know.
on the head.
I
You-
know,
you
it's
hit the-
negotiations, and I hate that we don't get to do it.
No, absolutely. That's why I brought this up, was a factor of equity. We are giving, I've got the numbers here, we are giving the International Association of Firefighters rank and file is about 480. So we're giving those folks an increase. And everyone else, we're saying, we may give you an increase, but right now you're absolutely getting nothing. As an accountant, I'm sure you understand that
I know.
no increase means you're actually losing money
I hate
as
that we
goods
can't
and
do the
services get more.
Fire department ones either. So
Pardon?
we can't negotiate with the unions either, us
We already
guys.
have. We have.
I
And
know,
they were
well,
getting an average of 2.38.
I know.
So all I'm asking is that the non-union employees, the 1,224, are kept on parity. We're harming no firefighters, and the numbers that Jill is about, and please confirm with Jill as I have, none of the numbers she's about to read are going to change should we vote for this. Not one number will change.
I trust you.
To trust
When
her,
you
not
give,
me.
I know, when you give us this stuff, but I just got to look at it.
Yeah, but
So
you
you want to call a break
understand-
so we can take a look, or?
Understand, we just handed out $500,000 to to the clerk of the court, not our employees. We just, in a quarter of the time
I
that
think-
it's taken to explain.
I think the
for very
CARES funds
people
could
that make
reimburse
these-
that.
For the very people that make these meetings
Yeah.
run. For the very same people that when we call up and we have a question of why is a ditch not been cleared out, or when is a road going to
Commissioner
be
Tawadia, you're
repaved?
preaching the choir. I agree with you here. It's just the numbers. I just got to see them. You know, that's what I'm driven by right now. And I do trust you, but you had time to look at this before right now. So if we
We're-
could-
Again, $78,000 of a $1.4 billion
where are you
budget.
pulling it from, though?
Where, from the general fund.
You've done this with me over $10,000 before, trying to figure out where the number's coming from. So if we could just have a break so that I can have a conversation.
That's the chair's
I'm
prerogative.
happy to do that. We can certainly have a 10 or 15-minute recess in a few minutes, but I do have a couple other questions with respect to this. And I'm kind of thinking aloud at the moment with respect to this. Again, without being too repetitious, hopefully, my concern is we're really comparing apples to apples. Fully disclosing that I didn't vote on the clerk's issue, which I think may have been the only conflict I've had in the time I've been up here. Folks that are making $0 that have been furloughed, to me, when we're obligated to pay for a certain portion of their budget, I don't know that I can say that's apples to apples. That doesn't mean that I'm not willing to support what you're trying to do here, at least in part. My concern, though, is whether we apply that to everyone or whether we apply that to folks that are making under a certain threshold, or whether we base it on whether, for instance, they're earning under the median for their line of work. I don't know, pardon my saying, so Ms. Bentley and Mr. Abate, if Ms. Bentley and Mr. Abate or a medical examiner who are all doing rather well need an extra 0.38% increase. I'd rather help the folks that are earning, let's say, under $50,000 a year, and I'm amenable to adjusting that up or down to some degree. But if the total compensation is in excess of $150,000 or $175,000, I don't know that we really need to be making an extra 0.38% bump. I just don't know that that's going to result in anything for taxpayers. So I'm okay with it for the folks that are earning under the average for their particular line of work, or even potentially for those that are earning under a reasonable measure, whether we say it's 50 or 40 or 60. You know, I'm flexible, but I don't know that I can get behind it across the board and apply it to the folks that are making the equivalent of $200,000 after compensation. Please.
I recall a board report that came up 2 years ago from Commissioner Isnardi. We'd given a 3.5% increase to county employees. Thank you. And the sheriff's office had only given itself given its employees a 3% increase. In a board report, we gave the Me Too clause to the sheriff's deputies, even though the contracts had already been negotiated. There was no talk like that's going on right here. I'm just asking that we treat our own employees the same as other employees.
Mr. Abate?
I want to raise one additional point.
Please,
and that
sir.
is the employees that we're talking about, the non-unit, we also have a second union, which is the LIU, that bargaining unit. And I just want to make sure from Ms. Hayes that the numbers that have been discussed includes that, because there is a Me Too clause in the LIU agreement that says if...
Mr. Abate, for the benefit of everyone here, could we try to either avoid acronyms or at least define them?
The
Please.
Labor's International Union, which
Thank
is
you.
our blue-collar bargaining unit. And there is a Me Too clause in there, and I just want to make sure that the numbers, the 300,077, would that include that? Because I know that there'll be something coming back to the board coming up. I believe, actually, I'm not sure, I have to ask the Human Resource Director, I believe it's coming up at the September 15th meeting, the extension of their contract, which already includes a Me Too clause in it.
Yes, it does include those employees.
It does?
Commissioner Isnardi?
Yeah, I mean, if you're telling me you can absorb basically the 70,000 within the budget because you've already allocated about 2% for the potential that we may give that increase. I mean, I'll talk about it over the break as well with you guys to make sure there's nothing I'm missing, but I don't have a problem supporting it. Where I think we may get in trouble is trying to piecemeal and say if you make under 50,000, or if you're, because I don't want to penalize anybody that's been here and worked their way up the ladder or gotten a further education, or I don't want to penalize somebody just because they make more money. That's, I think, more unfair than, I think everybody deserves it equally across the board. That would be my position, at least on that portion of it, if we do go forward.
And I'll just throw this out there before we recess for a few minutes. Obviously, we'll see how the board votes, but I would support it if we have some limits in place. I don't view it as penalizing those folks that are earning substantially more, but I think that we do have a lot of employees that are frankly underpaid that should be paid substantially more. But we also have some employees that are not in that particular boat. And I think if we focus on the folks that truly do need it at this point, I would feel a lot more comfortable about it, especially as Commissioner Pritchett mentioned, without having had the benefit of being able to look at this prior to today's meeting. I just don't feel comfortable extending it to literally everyone under the county umbrella. If you want to make it a little more broad than I initially suggested, if you want to make it everyone under 60,000, that would be fine, and just skip the average earning for their field. And we could have a workable number where I think programmatically they could go through, unless either Jill or Mr. Abate identify some concern that would be less than feasible. I would be comfortable supporting that tonight. You may have your 3 votes anyway, I don't know, but I would certainly vote for it if you proposed it in that fashion. Commissioner Pritchett.
Yeah, I think if I can just have a few minutes with the county manager to see if he's got any unforeseen things. I'll talk to him in private, Commissioner Tawadia, and then that'll help too. Because you're talking about Me Too clauses, so if we do this, maybe another group's going to do Me Too. This could end up being more than we know. I just think I need a few minutes to talk to you.
All right, so it's 6:09 now. I'm thinking just realistically, so we're not breaking for 5 minutes to come back to break again. Why don't we say 6:25? Is that okay, Commissioner Pritchett? Commissioner Snarty? Any objection to that? Okay, so we'll go ahead and recess till 6:25. Thank you all. Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, I'd like to change my motion, sir.
Okay.
The county manager had a 2% in his report for increases for staff. I would like to make a motion to change that to 2.38% and go ahead and make a motion to approve the rest of the tentative millages.
All right, help me out, Commissioner Pritchett. With respect to that motion, what was it that sold you on it? Because I'm wondering if I should be in the same boat or I should stick in the boat that I'm in.
I went back and ran some numbers with him, and we know what he already had planned with it. So I think that it'll be responsible. They're going to take a look at everything with it. But Commissioner Tawadia is correct on what he was talking about. So the county manager, instead of having that 2%, will now have the 2.38% to consider as he's moving forward.
Okay. Well, I'll be a team player on this one. I'll go ahead and second your motion as amended. Any further discussion on it? All right, seeing none, I'll go ahead and call the question. All in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Well, Commissioner Smith, do we still have you on there, sir? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I'm here, and I'll just weigh in a little bit. I was enchanted with the idea. I don't know where or how Commissioner Tawadia came up with it, but I was very enchanted. The only question I have is that, if it's a good idea or great idea, it certainly would stand the test of time, and we could have waited a week to do more research on it to see if it was indeed something that we can handle. But if you guys are good with it, I'll go right along with you.
All right, sir. Okay, so that brings us up to D4. Hey, Mr. Bonte, I don't think you're on.
Yeah.
Now you're on.
Chair and Board of County Commissioners, based on the approved changes and millage rates that were approved on agenda item D3, I will now ask the Budget Office to read into the record the revised aggregate millage rates.
Chair and Board of County Commissioners, the aggregate rolled back rate for the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget is 5.7176. The aggregate tentative millage rate for the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget is 5.6404. The tentative aggregate millage rate is 1.35% less than the aggregate rollback rate.
Chair and Board of County Commissioners, we are now ready for the rate approval and adoption of the specific program budgets. These actions are necessary in order to certify non-ad valorem assessment to the tax collector in accordance with the Uniform Method of Collection, Florida Statutes 917.3632.
Item D5 is the stormwater utility assessments and request adoption of the stormwater utility resolution ratifying, confirming, and certifying the annual stormwater utility special assessment rolls.
May I have a motion? Right, I'll go ahead and second Commissioner Pritchett's motion to approve item D as in Delta 5. Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
Item D6, request adoption of the assessment and ratification, confirmation and certification of the annual fire services non-ad valorem special assessment tax rolls.
All right, I'll go ahead and second this motion to approve Commissioner Pritchett. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving item D as in Delta 6, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? D6 passes unanimously.
Item D7 requests the adoption of schedule of rates and charges for hazardous materials special operations team, standby response, fire prevention, and inspection rates.
Have a motion? All right, a motion for Commissioner Pritchett. I'm just going to count on you for all of them. I'll go ahead and second that. Any discussion? All in favor of approval, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
Item D8 requests adoption of a resolution certifying the municipal services benefit unit assessment rolls to the tax collector.
May I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
I'll go ahead and second your most recent motion here. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. D9?
The Chair and Board of County Commissioners, in accordance with the Brevard County Code of Ordinances, I request adoption of the fiscal year 20 2020-2021 budgets for the following agencies: Solid Waste Management, Stormwater Utility Department, Fire Services, Non-Ad Valorem Assessment, and the Melbourne-Tillman Water Control District.
Commissioner Pritchett, would you?
Motion to approve.
All right, I'll go ahead and second your motion to approve. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, item Delta 9 passes unanimously. D10?
Chair and Board of County Commissioners, it is requested that the governing body of the Barefoot Bay Water and Sewer District approve a resolution adopting a budget for fiscal year 2020-2021.
Commissioner Tawadia, that's entirely in D3, is it not? It is. You have any concerns about this one? No. You want to do the honor, sir? All right, I will go ahead and second Commissioner Tawadia's motion to approve item D as in Delta 10. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. 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 Any opposed? D10 passes unanimously. D11?
Chair and Board of County Commissioners, based on the action taken under agenda item D3, I now ask the Budget Office read into the record the revised tentative budget for fiscal year 2020-2021.
Chair and Board of County Commissioners, the revised tentative budget for fiscal year 2020-2021 is $1,485,676,587. The budget represents a decrease of $84,720,385, or 5.39% less than the fiscal year 2019-2020 current budget of $1,570,396,972.
Chair and Board of County Commissioners, I request tentative approval of a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2020 and 2021 Brevard County budget.
So moved.
All right, looks like a motion from Commissioner Pritchett. Once again, I'll go ahead and second that. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. And that's all we have for D as in Delta, so we'll move on to board reports. Mr. Abate, sir?
No report.
Ms. Bentley?
No report.
Commissioner Pritchett? No report. Commissioner Tawadia? No report. Commissioner Smith, what have you got, sir?
Well, I just wanted to take a brief moment to address our first speaker this evening. I think the value of the sheriff's budget was explained by his very words. One of the primary purposes, as we all know, of government is to keep the public safe. So he acknowledged that we are in very uncertain times, and good times and bad, it behooves the public to know that they can walk out of their homes and go about their daily business without fear. And a good, strong law enforcement agency like ours, run by our extremely capable sheriff, is just that. They're there to protect us, and they do a great job doing it. So I just wanted to refer to that.
Yeah, we've got two of the deputies here, Commissioner Smith, and one of them could probably beat me in an arm wrestling match, and I'd say I'm probably on par with the other one. Depending on the day, it could go either way. But I give them credit where credit's due, and they certainly deserve it. Anything further, sir?
Nope, we're good.
Commissioner Isnardi?
I would take bets on an arm wrestle with you, Commissioner Lober, any day. Anyway, I don't have any report.
All right. I've got a short one. Actually, I planned on addressing something different today, but given the topic of the meeting, I think I need to confine it to something budgetary. I don't believe that we really have any need to declare a critical need this year to support the budget that we've all just addressed and that we've heard about for the past hour at this point, hour and 3 minutes. That said, I think I may have alluded to in a prior commission meeting some months ago, maybe even before COVID, that if necessary or even if beneficial, which I think is probably a more accurate descriptor, I wouldn't have a problem declaring a critical need, not to exceed the charter cap this year, but to absolutely solidify any potential argument to inoculate us from the possibility of having a problem when it comes time for the comptroller to issue a check. Seeing as how the comptroller is the same one that sued the county over this issue prior to having had it dismissed, I think this is a singularly unique year as far as the budget's concerned, and I think it would behoove us on a one-time basis fully acknowledging, at least my opinion, that we don't have to do this. I don't want to have any sort of issue with respect to there being a check not cut or a check cut in a lower amount from the comptroller's side to BCSO. So I don't know where the board is, but I would ask that we at least consider, and if this is something that you want to discuss individually with Jill or with Ms. Bentley or with Mr. Abate between now and the 15th, certainly I would encourage you to do that. I'm not going to ask for a motion or make a motion tonight, but I think that's something that we ought to individually discuss. My concern was a couple-fold after the lawsuit was dismissed, which I think was somewhat predictable at least, or the most predictable outcome. The concern I had was either he would find another plaintiff that wouldn't have a standing issue, or alternatively, if he couldn't do that or didn't want to do that, for instance, if he couldn't find a way to finance a separate plaintiff that could get around the standing issue, I don't want there to be the fallback that we may now have an issue where he doesn't recognize the validity of our using last year's budget to set the baseline without a new finding a critical need. But again, I do want to stress more than anything else that I don't think that we have a legal obligation to do this. This just cuts out the legs of any potential argument this year, knowing that the same person that just finished suing us is still at the helm at the comptroller. I don't have any intention to do this next year. I don't have any intention to suggest, that we do this in the future. But I think on a one-time basis, it may be something that is at least prudent to consider. So that's all I've got today. Anything else? Yes. So the question from Commissioner Pritchett was just a little more clarity on what it is that I'm requesting. I'm asking that my colleagues, between now and the meeting that we have scheduled for the 15th, chat either with Ms. Bentley or with Mr. Abate or Ms. Hayes, whoever amongst the three wishes to take the lead on this, to discuss the potential that the comptroller's office has the ability potentially to make an argument, given that their case was dismissed, that the same argument that they had that formulated the basis of their lawsuit against us would still somehow apply, that would, in such a fashion that would allow them to either reduce the payment to BCSO or to hold off on making that payment. I just don't want to find ourselves in a wholly avoidable situation that's not going to help the community in any way. So I think if we were to do that, again, my recommendation is not that we do that after the change of guard in the office. I don't think that the same level of concern exists with the new regime, so to speak. But I think with the outgoing regime, and I have nothing but good to say about Mr. Ellis, I do believe that he is and was firmly convinced that he was right with respect to this. I disagree with that. But I think that we have the ability to inoculate ourselves by having a finding of critical need. The staff, I guess, when we get to the 15th, the meeting on the 15th, the motion will probably either be, or I may request a motion to direct staff to work with BCSO to formulate a new package to present to the board in short order to justify a finding of critical need. Now, whether that's that they've hired X number of deputies and retained them, and that our population hasn't decreased, whether that's part of it, whether there are other SRO concerns, I leave that to them, but I think everyone that voted to support that finding understood that to constitute the new baseline. So just something to discuss with staff between now and the 15th. And that's all I've got. Anything further? Anyone? All right. Seeing nothing, we're going to go ahead and conclude at 6:38. We're adjourned.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.